Hey, what's up? This is AMP Radio, Always Make Progress. And we are your hosts, Ankur Bhattacharjee or Fractal Biomechanics on Instagram. And
Shaun Astorga and Performance Rehab on Instagram.
hey, Shaun, nice to meet you.
Ankoor. Yeah, well, we've met before, but yeah.
First episode of AMP Radio. It's pretty special, huh?
Yeah, man. It's this is something that people have been telling me to do for a long time, and you finally got me to do it. So here we are.
Yes, I pushed you. So, the first question, like the most important one. So, how did you come up with AMP, Always Make Progress, the clinical side as well as the mentorship side?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about the clinical side because a lot of people think of on the online space of AMP
Yes.
as just we do mentorship, right? Yeah, and the
Yeah.
clinical side is actually like the practice itself is the main business. So, but yeah, always make progress. A lot of it had to do with my experience, not as a medical professional, but more as a person who was injured and went through the medical system with an injury. I just happened to have obviously the medical professional background, and I was very discouraged by the care that I was receiving. And a lot of people really discounted the long-term aspect of recovering. I had a brain injury, and they were focusing on like short-term kind of improvements that never really happened. And then, I got to a point where I couldn't find answers, and I started working with somebody. His name is Ben House, and he kind of changed my perspective on a lot of things, right? Like stress response, the role of being able to recover, like what that actually means, not the stuff people like talk about on the internet, but literally when you are taken from a position where your body doesn't have the ability to get to the point where it needs to, right, to get past an injury or whatever it might be. Really changed my perspective on a lot of things, and it made me value progress, like what that actually means when someone says like to get 1% better every day and how that has a compounding effect over somebody's life. So I just try to take that thought process and make it into a physical therapy practice, right? And then the same kind of thought process applies to the mentorship, right? What does it mean to be a mentor or to have be a mentee or to go through like education and that kind of stuff?
Excellent, excellent. So, like, so when you started this MP, like, what were your goals, and where do you stand now? Your short-term as well as long-term goals. Where do you see AMP in the future?
Yeah, are you talking about just in general, AMP clinical and mentorship?
Yeah, both. Yeah,
Whatever.
both.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I can answer this broadly first. Is like I'm learning as a business owner, or I guess kind of multiple business owner, is that it's a lot of it has to do with solving problems. And in order to solve the problems, you got to acknowledge that they exist and figure out like where the hurdles are that you need to cross. So for the short term, for the clinical side, the big thing for me was just to uh, basically get a couple patients, and hopefully I do a good job with them, and then get more patients. And I have my one of my very good friends, Monica Signs, is a PT with me, and we're kind of at a point now where we're at a tipping point, right, where we can kind of stay stagnant, or we need to make a big change so that the company can get to ultimately where I want to see it. And one of the things that I really care about is obviously the patient's experience and giving them quality healthcare. But also I care about the clinician, because what happens way too often is that a physical therapist is very excited. They go into school, they get their degree, and they're like, I'm going to go change the world. And then they get out into the world and they realize that it is a very murky place for clinicians, and that people are within 6 months are getting burnt out. This is not just physical therapy. This is medical system in general. Getting burnt out. They don't have quality of life. They're taking home hours of notes every week. Sometimes on the weekend, their entire Saturday, Sunday is spent literally documenting like what they did with patients. And then we can talk about whether that's a good process or not. So giving them a place where they can take ownership over their process and what they're doing with people. So giving them a space where they can actually come in, practice how they want, live a life that they want to live, right? And have the freedom to do the things that they want to do and not be felt tied down to something that they don't believe in. Yeah, that's the main goal is this year, my goal personally is to open use our kind of model we have at AMP 1 and make an AMP 2 because it's very repeatable. You just need the right people in the right place, the right vision, and all that kind of stuff. The mentorship's kind of similar. Is I'm at a point now where it's gotten to a point where it's sold out all 4 times. Even when I had like 400 followers on Instagram, and I was like, no one's going to want to work with me. I only had 12 people in it at the time, but 12 people signed up, and I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And now we're at a point where I cap it at 15 for a reason, and there's a wait list for it, which is also very, very great. But I can't deliver on everything by myself, which is where obviously you come in, because in this next round you will be, taking I'm going to use the term faculty. I don't know if that's the right word, but you will be taking a role in guiding a lot of the mentorship calls, which is
Yes.
pretty cool, because obviously we could talk about your journey, how you've gotten here, and how we met and all that kind of stuff. So it's just been cool to see your growth, and it's exciting for me as a business owner to have someone who shares a similar vision, but who also can deliver on the vision, which is awesome. So
Yeah. Like I remember everything started with a DM during the lockdown. It was started with
you cold DM me, man. That was it. I usually delete those because I get like a million a day.
here we are today.
And here we are, man. That's it. You never know. You never know who's gonna come into your life, right?
Exactly, destiny. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the clinical thing and the mentorship thing, what do you think were the biggest hurdles that you had faced coming from a job world to the business world, owning your own business? So what do you think were the biggest hurdles?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the biggest hurdle is probably myself, a lot of times. And what I mean by that is getting started is really the hardest thing. And then once you get started, like, the problems don't go away, they're there, but like, you did the hard part. And for a lot of people, that's the hurdle, right? You could talk about it even like education, right? You want to learn and you keep learning, and you're afraid to put the information out into the world and actually practice and fail and figure things out, right? Same thing goes with running the clinic. Like, I had no idea what I was doing, right? Like, I just kind of like put it off. I mean, I can tell a story. Like, I literally put it off for like a year or maybe 2 from when I had the idea of having my own practice. I opened up literally the same month, March 2020, that the entire world shut down, right? So like, you can do all the planning you want, and ultimately it's not going to matter, because you can't plan for a pandemic where everything's out of your hands, right? So starting is the hardest part. It's the biggest hurdle. It always is. And then the second is also related to myself, is realizing what my limitations are, and that I need other people to fill those gaps, right? And there are people like Monica, who is very good at a lot of things that I am not very good at, right? And that's the only way that the end product or the end vision of the company is going to happen, is if I can find other people who have a similar vision, and I can put them in the right spot and help guide them, so that the company as a whole can get to the end point. Same thing for the mentorship program, same thought process.
So now coming to AMP radio.
AMP radio.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Let's talk about its inception. Like, where did you come up with this idea?
Man.
I should take some credit of it.
I was gonna say, I think you should take some credit, but I can offer insight into where my head was at originally, and because honestly, it's really you is the reason that it's happening. My original thought was, and I have nothing against the podcasts, but I feel like that's a saturated market. Like, everyone's got a podcast. It's just like everyone's got a mentorship program now, right? Same idea. So like, you hear the same guest on 10 different podcasts. It's all the same conversations, and that's fine, right? Like, it's great. But like, I think there's a relatability issue for other practitioners, right?
All
People
the
like
same guest, 10 podcasts, all the same, except for listen, learn, leverage.
well, that's very true. Your podcast is very different, and I appreciate that about it.
Thanks, man.
You get to the personal side of things. But yeah, my original idea, right? So there's a podcast, I forget the name of it, that I really enjoy. I think Shaun Light, who put it out into the world, is the either Netflix CEO or former Netflix CEO, one of those. I forget what his job is, or creator of Netflix. He has a podcast where an entrepreneur comes on and asks him a question, and it's basically like a mentorship call, and he helps them kind of think about how they should approach that problem. So my initial thought was a podcast where I was going to call it TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read. so basically, right, like just hit the points, the bullet points, and it was going to be young clinicians can come on, and we could just talk about like literally the struggles that they're kind of having, right, as a person who's coming up in the PT world, who's getting information from multiple sources, whether they're good or bad, obviously it's hard to tell, and those types of things. So when you said we need to do a podcast for the mentorship, that was kind of a good segue, because it takes a lot of the pressure off of me to like do all of this stuff. And right here we are. So
Yes, here we are. And so talking about the mentorship. So
Mhm.
when you see the new coaches, the new physios, practitioners, anyone, and there's this MP mentorship, how do you think MP mentorship is going to help those coaches and physios, even the experienced ones who are trying to level up their game? So how do you think it's going to benefit?
Yeah, man. So a lot of people who come through AMP mentorship program have gone through other programs, right? And that's not saying anything about any other program. I'm just pointing out the obvious, like it's truth. So like you can ask anyone. Um, and a lot of people have a similar roadblock holding themselves back. And just like I had the roadblock of myself, just getting started, people have a similar roadblock with putting information into practice. And I think what I have noticed that separates our AMP mentorship program is helping people actually take theoretical information and figure out how it applies to the people that they are working with. Additionally, there is an unfortunate thought process that everyone who posts stuff on Instagram is doing so in like this perfect manner, and they're always picking like the right things for the right person at the right time. They never make a mistake, and it's just like that's just like not true. It's just flat out not true. And the fact that like something like social media is like a highlight reel of people's lives, right? It really messes up with a young coach's or clinician's head. Not even just young, anyone, right? Because they're like, you start getting those thoughts, right? Like, what am I doing wrong? What am I not doing with this like breathing stuff that everyone else seems to understand? And reality is people are not really applying it well, right? Or they don't have the maybe they're operating or teaching from a place of certainty, when the reality is nothing about working with humans is certain. So there's this gap that needs to get filled, and I think we do a pretty good job of filling that.
So what do you think are the biggest voids or downsides in the fitness and rehab world, which from your side and from our side we are trying to fill in the AMP mentorship thing? What do you feel the voids are?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best. I don't know. I mean, I'll give my thoughts, but I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, there's going to be a
yeah,
lot, right?
yeah, we try, of
We
course, there's
try.
nothing
Yeah,
guaranteed. Yeah.
yeah. Like I don't want to sound like I'm like the arbiter on these things, but here's some thoughts, right? One of the big things is that we need like a certain level of understanding, and we get to that level of understanding, and then everything is going to be perfect, when the reality is and this is going to be a little philosophical, but if you think of things like we're all where we're supposed to be at this moment, no matter how else you want to approach it, right? So we have the information that we need to start working with people. It might not be the best, but we have a certain level, right? So if you go through a DPT program, a doctor of physical therapy program, you at least have baseline competence to start working with humans. Is that the best and end all? No, it's not, but you can start from that point. So the main thing is people are lacking the confidence to not know something, right? To just throw something out into the world and figure out like what the next step needs to be. So the big thing for me, right? Like say you're working with a client and you are learning this new information and you want to know where it fits, right? Sometimes you just got to like start trying stuff, right? Having a thought process behind what you're doing is step one. Is it safe is step two. And if you don't get the desired outcome, just being comfortable with pivoting, right? Like is really like what we're talking about here. And that's kind of like the starting point for a lot of people and the hurdle for a lot of people. So that's a big problem, is just not getting to that hurdle. Other hurdles, right, or other issues in the industry are you have a lot of what's the word, like a lot of divide, right, between tribes, right? People have like this like emotional attachment to certain groups, and they're literally blinded by it. And I'm not going to say any groups, but like there are people who literally look at everything through one tiny little lens, and they think it's like the end all be all. Or they'll say they've like taken a deep dive into all of these different things, and they've come out the other end like enlightened, like they have all the answers. And the reality is one, there's no way you could take a deep dive into every single thing that you say you've taken a deep dive. There's just literally no time to do that. But two, it's like you're creating the same tribe, right, in that situation as the tribes you're hating on. So it's just like there's just like all this divide, and there aren't that many people who are just like trying to figure out like what is the best way we can move forward. How can we take in a lot of different sources of information and make it into something special? Those are some pretty big issues. I would say, just even as you have me going here, not, you have client and client A, right? Your client A has a specific goal. You're a clinician or a coach or whatever however you identify, and you're not, there's a disconnect, right? Your methodologies don't really fit in with their goals, right? Is like a more micro level kind of issue, right? Where the person is just literally like not meeting the client where they're at. And they're just can't get out of their own way. You see this in PT all the time with things like people take hard stances about like manual therapy, even though every single patient thinks manual therapy is going to help them. Some people you can have an educated conversation with, and they're like, okay, I'm good. You know what? You're right. I've tried manual therapy in the past, and while it may have been helpful short term, I'm obviously still dealing with the same issue. But you also have client B or patient B, and they're hell bent on the fact that manual therapy is going to help them. And it's not your job as a clinician to be like, you are wrong, right? It's like, okay, let me meet them where they're at. Maybe I have to give them a little manual therapy, and we can use that as an entryway to changing their belief system a little bit on a subject. But there are clinicians who don't do that, who just butt heads, and they're like, you know what, go somewhere else, because I'm not gonna mobilize your neck. I'm not gonna rub your neck. It's not gonna do anything, So those are some general issues. I don't know if that got. I can ramble on this topic for a while. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like, you can't change someone's opinions, beliefs by being, I mean, by attacking someone personally.
yeah.
You'll have to slowly change their opinions and beliefs. So you cannot like just attack someone and hope that, oh no, they will start understanding me. Doesn't really happen in the real world. Only a small percentage of people can change, rest of them won't.
Yeah, for sure. It's like it goes with anything, right? It goes with the patient-client relationship about maybe not the best treatments, but the patient thinks it's the best. But it also goes, bigger, right? It goes how information is presented on social media, right? People have like they're trying to use very aggressive tactics to change someone's beliefs, and that's literally not going to work. Never will work. Not even like 0.1% of the time, because we all have an emotional attachment to our belief systems, right? And most people's initial reaction when someone attacks it is that they get frustrated, right? They get angry. They're like, what the hell, this person's an idiot. And then the reality is, you take a step back and you're like, one, we're probably saying very similar things. It's just coming at it from a different angle. But two, like if you come at them hot, there's no shift there, right? But if you can gradually start showing information why your perspective is what it is and how it's different than mine, that's a different conversation. Because then over time, right, maybe it's a short period, maybe a longer period of time, you're going to change the belief.
So, coming to the mentorship, what does the word mentor and mentorship mean to you? Because it's
Yeah,
been
man.
used widely. The word has lost its meaning, its depth, and like, I think you're the correct person to describe it.
Oh, I appreciate that. I don't know about that, but yeah, I would agree with you that the word itself is like, what does it even mean anymore, right? Because everyone and their mother is a mentor, regardless of if they've just graduated from school or not, but you have a social media account, right? And it has a lot of followers. So you got authority now. Yeah, it's mentorship, right? It's like it's a relationship, right? it is guidance. And I like Craig Liebenson, Dr. Craig Liebenson. He's a chiropractor in I think LA. But he always talks about his relationship with patients and how he's their the Alfred to their Batman, right? So helping guide from the side, right? And that's the same thing to me as what like a mentor is. Like we're all on this journey of getting better professionally and personally so that we can better help the people that we serve. I'm just a little further along on this journey than someone like yourself, right? So I can use my experience. I can use my educational background and assimilation of information to help figure out where you're stuck and where you're struggling, and help guide you to the next step. And you've worked with me, right? I never claim to have all the answers. Like I don't really, if I don't know something, I just say I don't know, but here's my thoughts on it, right? And I think that's what it's about, right? It's a relationship. And the relationship needs to be one of trust, and not like me lecturing down to you, right? It's like a conversation, like figuring out where the problem is and figuring out the steps we have to take to move forward is really it. It's more than an 8, 10, 12-week program. It goes beyond
Yes,
that.
yes.
Contrary to popular belief, if people DM me from a year ago from who were in the program, and we have conversations still, right? Like, and that's how I want people to think of our relationship if they work with me in that capacity.
Correct. So like, this is my first-hand experience, and I know it, and that's why I love being a part of AMP. So I know this. So now the question is that, as a mentor, what makes you happy? What gives you satisfaction?
Yeah. One of the big things I think we all struggle with at some level, and it shows itself in a lot of ways, is confidence. So I think one of the coolest things to see in the short term is when people are going through the mentorship program is how their confidence improves within our formal time together. I think that's really cool to see. The other thing that I think is really cool is when like someone, like I can just think of people recently, right? Like they went through the first mentorship program over a year ago, and they send me like a client case study or like a testimonial that someone left them. And it shows the shift in how that person started, right? The patient, or if it's a training client, started, and where they currently are. And I think that's really cool to see, because it shows growth in the clinician, how they were able to navigate a very difficult, I keep saying clinician, coach, whatever, I'm going to use those words interchangeably. It shows a shift in their ability to navigate maybe a difficult situation, or something, that hurdle that they've overcome that helped this client get to the next point. And I think that's one of the coolest things to see. You're a good example of something that makes me happy, and I hate saying like myself as like a mentor, but whatever, I'll go with it.
Yeah.
Is like when you and I met, you literally DM'd me, right? And we would have like, you would DM me, I'm gonna use the word basic questions, but basic questions, and you would probably say they're basic questions now too, right? Because you're obviously helping people understand some of this stuff. And now to see you at a point where you are like, you have your own business, you started your own podcast, you recently moved to pursue career opportunities,
Yes.
and you are now part of AMP. None of that literally would have happened, right, if you didn't go through some kind of personal, professional growth and journey yourself, right? So like, it's just cool to see those kind of things happen, right? Because it's impact beyond like, I helped you understand why an ISA an infrasternal angle might be relevant or might not be relevant, right? It's like, you are a human, and now you are growing as a human, which is cool, so
dealing with humans, most important.
That's what we're doing, right? We're dealing with humans,
Complex.
Mm-hmm.
Not just biomechanics at play, like everything else is.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
so the next question is along the lines of this. So like, what advice would you give to the new coaches and clinicians who are trying to navigate through the world of theory, books, like the algorithms, and working with real humans, the practical side of things?
Yeah, that's a good one. The one thing is just going to be like, just start doing stuff, right? Like, have a rationale for why you're doing it. Make sure you are doing stuff that is in line with the people you work with their goals and where their understanding of things. and understand that things, right? Progress is a real thing, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So you might not, you have to set expectations, right? Every working with different people, right? Each person's expectations have to be a little bit differently, right? My goals for working with you would like, okay, Ankoor gets what I'm trying to go for. So it's going to probably happen a lot quicker than like 60-year-old dude who, right, like, those are just two different scenarios. So understand that, and don't be afraid. We had this idea in our head, right, that there's going to be some level of knowledge that we're going to acquire, or some level of intelligence, and we're just going to be like, almighty, like I'm going to be, practicing like someone who's got 30 years of experience. It's like, that's never going to happen. You're never going to feel like you have enough information, right? You have to take what you have now, because you're currently working with people, right? So you have to just figure out what makes sense for the people you're working with and yourself, and like put together some framework, and then just know that framework is going to change as you gather more information and more experience and all those types of things. Just be okay with that. Just do it.
This
Unless
is
it's reckless.
absolutely
If it's reckless, don't do it.
Yeah, safe to fail experiments. So
Safe to fail. Yeah.
So this is something I want to convey to all the new coaches and clinicians as well, that make mistakes. Allow yourself to make mistakes, and ask your clients to allow themselves to make mistakes, because you also want to get things done in day one, rep one, set one. They also want the same, but then both sides have to come to a middle ground where you're like, okay, I mean, let's set expectations. It's not going to happen on day one. Let's move slowly and progress in a way where like you can attain your goals in a realistic time frame. It's not like set one, day one, and everything is like
Good to go.
all clear for the rest of your life, and you don't need to do anything. Like, it doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
People are overburdened. A huge portion of that is because of social media and its portrayal of people being experts. I think that's a huge mistake. This is something people will find relatable. The newbies is that I'm someone who has also started this very new, but today I know the reality of a lot of people. I know the reality of the coaches and practitioners, and how things are not very perfect. And I know that. I used to think like, oh, I'm so bad and I suck and all the stuff, those negative thoughts. But then I saw people coaching, and I'm very confident about myself.
Yeah. You see, you get a little peek behind the doors, right? Yeah.
Yes. So, and the good clinicians, good coaches, they admit that they mess up. They admit. Mike K, on my podcast, he said that I eat it in front of the people who mattered the most, the clients. I eat it in front of them. Zach Couple says that it's just a very educated guess and trial and error that goes on, because you never know how the person in front of you is going to react. Might be psychological thing holding them back, like you never know. So the best of the names, they admit that they are not 100% perfect. They make mistakes. They learn, okay, what did I learn from this mistake? Now let's go to the next step.
Yeah. And you said something in there that's important, and that's expectations, right? Is setting
expectations,
those. Right? That's our job, right? Regardless of what field. If you're working with humans, even if you're an accountant, right, you need to set expectations, because the biggest issues that happen and why people get frustrated is in anything, any relationship, is communication, right? Or communication breakdown, or misinterpretation of information, or whatever it means. That's going to happen no matter what. But setting up a situation where you can have those conversations with people and make sure you're on the same page, even if it's a difficult conversation, goes a very, very, very long way. And the other idea or thought is around what you just said, this idea of perfection, and then how the best professionals, right, they realize that they're not perfect, and they don't claim to be perfect. That's obviously like a very, very, very important thing, and you can frame it for yourself, as either, it's a mistake, what can I learn from it, or just understand that every opportunity you have, right, is a learning experience in and of itself. Even if you do well, even if I pick the best, Ankoor comes to me with 10 years of back pain, and I pick the best exercise and the back pain goes away, like I shouldn't pat myself on the back. I need to be like, Shaun, why did this work? Why did this work in this moment with this person? Because even if I don't know what the answer is, right? Going through that thought process is helpful, right? Because it could be like, maybe because he moved to a new town and like a lot of stress in his life is removed. And I just happened to pick I don't know, an exercise he liked, right? Whatever. It could be that simple, but I thought about it, right? And now I have a framework in my head developing. Like those are very important because we tend to focus on something goes wrong. Let me see how I can fix it versus like, okay, why did this go right? Like that's also a very useful question to ask.
This is an important topic of discussion because Bill says the same thing. Like starting point of the person matters because, okay, this works on this person. There comes another person with 10 years of back pain. You do the same exercise, nothing happens. Now tell me what's the reason.
You've never been to New York City, right?
No.
Yeah, dude, like I live 45 minutes from New York City. It is like the most stress inducing thing for me to have to go there because like you could be walking around 2:00 in the morning, midnight, and it's like super bright with all like lights and all this stuff, like the subway system, like the traffic, like it is like an intense situation. Like that's a very different environment compared to like where I live now, right? I live in like like a typical like suburban area. Very different feelings being there. Like, and I can't even tell you when I had like the concussion and like the first time I went there, like it was like a daze. Like I felt like I had like jet lag for like a week after. Like it's really like the impact on your system you can't really appreciate, right? If you're not in like that environment, or like for me, I just took it for granted. Like I'm just like I went there, went home, and it wasn't an issue. Then I had a concussion and it was having trouble recovering, and I went there and I'm like, oh shit, this is like you want to talk about cortisol levels in your body and all that kind of stuff, like like that's people's daily lives for some people, right? So like that's not to be taken lightly,
light everywhere, the city that never sleeps.
Yeah, man. So it's like these things, right? They all matter. It's just what are we influencing for the person in front of us? We probably won't know. We won't know for sure what however many systems there are, what are there, 11, 12, whatever, like some combination of those are going to be right at interacting at some point, and we're going to dampen some, amplify some, we don't know, right?
Bill says the best that you are here to create an environment so that the change takes place. You never know if the change will take place or not, but you are here just to facilitate the environment like playing the educated probability thing. That's it.
Yeah.
And he also says this, the imperfection thing, like he says this, he removes his cap and you see this car on the steering wheel, like, oh I did it wrong today with this client, I should have done that instead of this. And
yeah, man. Yeah, I always have even driving home, right, from the clinic, like I have those conversations in my head. Could I have done this better? Oh man, I didn't think of this at the time. Let me just email them real quick when I get home. Like those things happen. Like it's normal. Like, and that's good, right? You want to be thinking about it, right? You want to self-reflect in all those types of things. Yeah, you can even talk about environment from like people discount this stuff, like personal space with an individual, right? We have, like, my wife and I were at a Christmas party last weekend, and we literally met this person and she was right in our face talking to us. And I'm like, yo, like, this is too much for me right now. Like, you're just literally in my bubble and this makes me very uncomfortable. But think of that as like a practitioner, right? Like you have a practitioner, you're sitting on a treatment table and they're taking the history, talking to you, and they're standing up over you. Like that's a very different situation than if they are sitting at your level, right? You can even go further when you start looking into some of like the literature about spatial relations, right? And setting a person up where you're on their left side versus their right side, because there's differences, right? So we have like, you can go into lighting in the room, right? Making someone comfortable, or having like shitty blue light, like, those fluorescent lights, like all those things can matter. It's just like to the individual in front of you, like, doesn't matter for them. Who knows, right? We don't know.
Very true. So even in online sessions, like when I have clients, I tell them that it's okay to fail, allow yourself to fail, because you are not going to be perfect. And I understand why. I'm a stranger to you. This is probably the first call after the discovery call, the first session, and a stranger staring at the camera this way, like staring at the screen and looking at your ribs and pelvis. Like, it can be, It can be
Yeah.
like you can't breathe that way. Like if someone's watching you so closely, watching your axial skeleton, like it can be a bit tricky. So
Yeah.
when they're
But that
alone,
goes,
homework, then they might be doing it better because no one's watching them.
yeah. And that goes to expectations though too. Like I learned this very quickly when I started AMP, right? Is people didn't know what to expect, right? This is like a different type of situation with physical therapy than people are used to. So then I just started telling them in the introduction email, here's what you can expect your first visit. And then I stopped getting those questions because, right? So it's just like being aware of what people, because people are going to tell you what the issue is, right? Just like if someone comes to me with like pain, right? Let's say shoulder pain for 10 years. I need to understand that situation because they're literally, their story will tell me what the issue is. And then it's just on me to figure out the tactical way I'm gonna approach it. Same thing with business, right? Like people are literally telling me what hurdles they're having or what things are coming up from their end, and it's either up to me. I can address it by making an email that introduces, or an introductory email that addresses all these same questions I keep getting, or I can just have every new patient come and ask me the same question, and then I email them or respond to them, individually. It's like, no, this is obviously an issue because now my first 10 patients are like, hey, what can I expect? What should I wear for the first visit? What can I expect? How long is this session going to be? Are we going to be doing exercises? Are we going to be talking? So I just literally lay it out now. And I'm like, here for your first session, you can expect, wear these kind of clothes. We're going to go through, this is our assessment. This is what we're going to talk about, blah, 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 and it's just like done. That's it, So communication and expectations, man, they're
Oh,
important.
I was exactly going to say those two words: communication and
Environment.
expectations. Yes, and the environment that you set it up. Like
Mhm.
you could be the most technical guy, you know everything. Of course, it's not possible, just saying.
Yeah.
But if the person in front of you doesn't feel the positive vibe, the comfort vibes, the pleasant vibes, not gonna stick
Yeah.
for long. That's for sure.
They need to exactly feel comfortable, and they want to feel heard, because unfortunately most people don't get that in at least the medical world. I know the coaching and training world is a little different, but people don't feel heard, right? They feel rushed. So someone takes time to listen to their story, and respect their what they're feeling and validate what they're feeling. That goes a very, very, very long way, because now the trust is starting to develop, right? And the comfort level is there, and it's like, okay, this person obviously is handling things a little differently. They care about what I have to say, and they're actually asking me questions that are including me in the process, right? Like that's different, right? And it's just like, unfortunately the bar is very low in our field, right? PT, it really is. So just doing that alone will set you apart, and then you figure out the rest, right? That's kind of how figure out the rest.
Stress is stress, because if I
Stress is
have
stress.
unspoken emotions in me and I do not get it out, no one's understanding me. Of course, if I have shoulder issues, like I'm a client, and in my mind I have this shoulder issue, which no one around me is understanding, because they're also like me, day-to-day people, like not clinicians or medical professionals. So when I go to a medical professional, I expect to like give out everything that I have to say, to get that speaking energy out. And and if I get validated, wow, I think that's the best thing I can. That is also a very stress buster thing as well in itself.
Yeah.
Stress is
Yeah.
stress. When you feel
Yeah.
light, it is a huge relief when you have someone to share things with.
Different. Yeah, it opens up the relationship too, right? The conversations that happen, like they get deep, right? I used to get so awkward, feel so awkward, uncomfortable when people would start opening up about like underlying reasons why they're concerned. Now in the
Yes,
initial session,
yes.
I just literally keep asking questions till I get to that point. Like I want to know why is this person so concerned about their low back pain? Like,
Hmm.
because from my perspective, I'm like, oh, this is kind of straightforward. Like this is just like he tweaked his back a little bit. We know things that are aggravating and things that are not aggravating. So I'm already putting together in my head, this is like a positional thing. But then you keep asking the questions like, oh yeah, what is it like that you're like concerned about? Like what are
Hmm.
your like, the biggest things for you around this injury? And then they're like, well, I hurt my shoulder last year and I wasn't able to participate in my daughter's softball practice. And I don't want it the
Hmm.
same thing to happen now. Because now it's like, okay, I get the emotional side of
Emotional
this. This
connect. Yeah,
person,
yeah.
right now I get it. This person is not really concerned because of back pain. They're concerned of what the back pain means for their ability to function and to be in their daughter's life. That's a very different perspective than like, okay, this person just has positional based low back pain or extension based low back pain, and I just got to put them in positions that make it feel better. It's now I understand at a deeper level, okay, this person is very concerned about something that I 5 seconds ago I thought was nothing, and now I'm like, okay, this person has a lot of there's more to this, right? And if we don't address this part, right, and relate back to how we're going to help solve this problem, like it's a different conversation, right? Then you just got some low back pain, I'm just going to brush it off and give you a couple exercises and we're going to make it better, so relationships different in that capacity.
Yes, relationship is, I would say, first and foremost, then your technicalities come in. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So the young coaches, practitioners, even the experienced ones in the real life, they are afraid to put themselves out on social media. What do you think the reasons are, and what would you advise to people like those? Because I know that you also encourage people to come up with their social media stuff, their podcasts if needed. Like that's a different headache for sure. But then at least posting on social media. So that is something people do not do. A lot of people do not do because they fear. So if you could throw some light on that.
Yeah, for sure. And this is again, something that I struggled with too, and I still do sometimes. I just care less, about the reactions now, as the more I do it. But a lot of and this has to go with kind of my perception on just approaching certain things in life is when we're afraid to do something, that probably means that we need to be doing that thing, right? And I'm not talking about like skydiving. Like I'm never going to skydive because like the risk reward is just not there for me. But
Yes,
I mean
exactly.
like life events, right? If we want to think about
Yes.
growth as a human and growth as a whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like perfect example is like we started recently at AMP working with out of network insurance, right? And one of the part of the process is we have to literally tell a person, like call them back and be like, hey, you know what, your insurance doesn't cover us, right? So you have to pay our self-pay rates, and here they are. So I've gotten better at those conversations, but I would get very freaked out about having that conversation, and I would just put it off, and I'd literally just waste so much time in my head being like, oh my God, I have to have this really hard conversation with a person, And then now I just realized like I just got to do it, right? And I did it once, and I'm like, okay, it's not really that bad, I just framed it appropriately the first time, so they expected it. And then time two, I did it. It really wasn't that bad. Now I just call them right back. I don't even think about it, right? Same with social media, right? It's a hurdle, right? It's if you are afraid to like literally put your thoughts out there to be critiqued, like just do it, and you're going to see, one, people don't critique you, right? Or they do and they're afraid to like really say something to you, and then the next time you go and do it, right, it's going to be easier, and then it's going to be easier, and it's very helpful just from like a professional development standpoint to do those things and put yourself in those situations and get comfortable with them. So that's really the biggest thing, is just like figure it out as you go, kind of, right? You don't have to have your personal, like your avatar and all that kind of BS. Yeah, that's hurdles, right? Just do it, and the people who are going to resonate with will kind of find you, right?
Yes.
Kind of
Correct.
just go from there.
Correct.
I don't even know if I answered the question. I just kind of,
Yeah. Like
my thoughts just went.
We should be caring less. And the thing is that we both understand we have jobs, we left it to be in this field, and together here we are, like a guy who left Wall Street, joined Physio World, a guy who left a software company, joined the coaching industry, and now they're working together. And like, oh, like,
yeah,
you never know.
Those are all, that's the biggest hurdle right there, right? A career shift is it's hard, and if you can do enough like things that you're perceiving as difficult or you're afraid to do, like the better, in my opinion, and that's just something. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I still get scared to do stuff, and I still have fear is like a big thing that holds me back from doing things. I just get more and more comfortable with it, right? And it's hard because like, especially personality wise, like I'm like an introverted person. I'm as introverted as you'll find, right? And for me to put myself out there on social media, I've just gotten more comfortable with doing it to the point where people don't really believe me when I tell them that I'm introverted. And it's just like, you're seeing social media Shaun, right? You're not seeing personal Shaun. Like they're very different things. I've done it so much on social media. Like it used to take me like 2 hours to write a post. And now like the one I did yesterday, I wrote in 5 minutes. I just did it right in the app. I didn't even like pre-write it, it's just exposure, right?
That's the most important thing. Like to switch careers, a lot of people do not do it, cannot do it because it's paying their bills, like whatever the
Mhm.
circumstances are. I respect that. Like they have to pay their bills, they have their insurance and everything. So because of that, but they still inside there's a burning desire to switch, to get out of the hell that they're currently in, but they
Mhm.
can't. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to take that decision to leave everything behind, start in a different field from scratch. Like 2020, like from 2018, life has been full of events for me. Like left the
Yeah.
job 2020, lockdown. 2019 I prepared for CSCS. 2020 lockdown, upgraded my understanding of the human body. 2021 eventful, started podcast, became a part of AMP, moved to a bigger city. Like things which are uncomfortable, do
Yeah.
it, do it.
And you're describing what happens when you start doing those things. It's a domino effect, right? Because like perceived hurdles start to not become perceived hurdles anymore, right? And it's just like you could think back, like if I get worried or I'm afraid to do something, I'm like, well, like let's think about this. Like I literally changed careers, right? Complete different professions. I went from in a pretty significant injury where I was told I'm not going to be a PT anymore to now I have my own PT practice and I'm helping other PTs and coaches do stuff. Right. So when you start like putting it in your head, you're like, you know what, I've already kind of overcome things that are bigger than this. Right. And it's just getting used to doing them. I'm not saying that fear doesn't exist. It's just like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Right. Like you do something and you fail. Like it's not that big of a deal. Right. Like, especially like, in the US, man, like I can literally, when I was thinking about starting AMP, I'm like, worst case scenario, it sucks, right? And I get no patience and I spend some money up front and I fail. What am I going to do? I could literally, I got a bar down the street from my house. I can just learn to become a bartender and I'll make money. It's not going to be a problem, right? I can work at Whole Foods and I'll get like a huge discount on my my groceries, right?
You
You
still
know,
have a financial world CV, so good
yeah,
enough to
and
go back to your financial world.
I'll figure it out, right? Like I'm comfortable with that, right? Same, like I can tell like my wife too, right? She owns her own practice and she is business planning right now for a very, very, very huge shift. Like I don't know if I can speak to what it is right now. But like it is a huge, huge risk, huge reward scenario. And like I will tell you this, a year ago, neither of us would have been comfortable with it. And now we're both like super pumped for it. So like,
Awesome.
right? Like it's just like you just have to like weigh the pros cons and ask yourself what's the worst that's gonna happen. Like, and
Hmm.
that's really like it sounds simple. I shouldn't make it's not as simple as it sounds, but like when you start framing things from that perspective, your worldview will change and opportunities will find you and they will open up for you for sure.
Yes.
And honestly, like tying this to the mentorship program, like things that have been helpful for me is having like support from people like my wife, obviously, right? Or like even doing this like podcast, having support from people like yourself. Um, a lot of people who come in the mentorship program want to have an online side business, but they never started it, or they want to go out on their own and have their own cash practice or whatever they want to do, right? And being able to see people come through the mentorship program and gain that confidence and have conversations with us about that and how steps to take and all those things and seeing what they're doing, like it's cool, right? Because the hardest part is literally getting started, and having someone who's on your side who's going to help you get there is huge, right? Look at like Dana, right? Dana Harrelson. She is someone who like she's just doing it, like like she literally started an online business. She's still working full time at her job, and like she's putting out stuff every day, and it has different programs going and all that kind of stuff. And that doesn't happen, right, if you don't literally just take the leap and just do it. And then and once you're there, the problems are going to present themselves and you'll figure out how to solve them. But if you don't get to that point where you're starting, it doesn't matter.
Regret is probably the biggest weight you are gonna carry in your life.
Yeah.
Not those deadlift or squats.
What's the saying is like I don't remember exactly what it is, but there's like millions of like life-changing ideas that are in the grave,
Oh
right? They're in the
yes, yes,
graveyard,
yes, yes, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. World
Because
changing
people
ideas in the
just
grave.
they keep them in their head, and they're just afraid that the problem is the differences, right? They're afraid to start. And if you start, the ideas will come, and like your creativity will change, and like your thought process will change. And relying on yourself is very different than relying on a salary, right? Because when I rely on myself, I'm creative, right? I have to figure out, problem solve. How am I going to make business grow in the middle of a pandemic? I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And then the next problem comes, and that's where we're at, right? How do I figure out how to grow AMP to 2 clinics? Like that's where we're at, so.
Rua said this great. So he's from Ireland, came to USA, almost 10 years now in USA. He's doing phenomenally great as a coach. And what happened is he said it on my podcast that he has seen multiple immigrants from the world come to USA and absolutely crush it in the business because they don't have a fallback plan. They don't have
No
their
fallback.
parents to pay their bills. So when you have fire in your ass, that's when like you give your best because you don't have any other option. I don't have anywhere to live. I don't know anyone. I don't know a single soul in this country, a different country. I have to work my ass off in order to sustain
Yeah.
myself. And that is
Well,
how you slowly progress.
yeah, it's true. And it's not saying it's easy. It is not.
Very
And,
hard.
and one thing, and this was something I dealt with too, is a false sense of security when you work for somebody else. And what I mean by that is you have depending where you work, right, in your position. But for me, for example, I had a salary that was good. I had health insurance. I had continuing education allowance, $2,000 a year. Continuing education, that's a lot of money for continuing education. And that's honestly why I've been able to take so many courses, right? And then it's just like that's a false sense of security, because if I go out on my own, I'm paying for all that stuff. I have to make my own salary. I have to pay for my own health insurance. I have to fund my own continuing education, right? And I have to build a business, right? Like all these things. But the difference is like those that security is fake, because the reality is, like, when I got injured, right? What happened? Like, no one gave a shit, right? I mean, they cared, but like ultimately it didn't affect their business because they just hired another PT, and they filled my spot. Even if like skill level was different, it doesn't matter, because from a business standpoint, that person is still going to churn out patients, right? They're going to see visits and they're going to make revenue. It doesn't have anything to do with me. So that security was gone, and just like that, right? So ultimately, like, if you just shift your perspective a little and be like, literally, what does it mean for me to get training clients? How hard is that going to be? Are people going to follow me? Yeah, they probably will. That's how AMP started, right? Was patients who just followed me. Like health insurance, you can just literally buy your own private health insurance. Me and my wife have been doing it for, I don't know, 3 years now, 4 years now. You just pay for it, right? So it's just like those things are like hold people back. And the reality is the security isn't as strong as people think, right? Look at what happened with the pandemic. People in the US, right, furloughed, right? Literally their salary went from a certain amount cut in half or less. And that's a reality, right? And that's just how fragile things are. And that's, the question is like, do you want to trust yourself and your ability to do something, or, or not? If you want to get out there and put yourself out there, only way it's going to happen is if you take the jump,
Yeah, I remember your IG post. You are replaceable. So that's
Yeah,
exactly what you described here. Like, you have to trust
you're
yourself.
replaceable. You're replaceable. Yeah, 100%. And that's a harsh reality. It's not good or bad, right? It's just something you need to know, and then use that as right to make a decision.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
I,
yeah, continue.
no, go ahead. I can ramble on. I'll just say it real quick.
Yeah,
Think
sure.
about it this way too, right? And this happens oftentimes in the PT world. It is like your salary is going to max out very quickly in PT world, unless you take a director role. Then your director salary is maxed out very, very quickly, like literally within like a couple of years, right? For some people. And then what? They're not going to, they're going to give you your like 2-3% raise every year, right? And should be higher now with like inflation where it's at, but they're just going to start hiring cheaper people to do the same job, right? Because from a business standpoint, think about it. Like, you have a mill clinic, they don't really care how good you are outcome wise. They care about numbers, right? Because they're venture capital backed, right? So their business model is set up, so it makes sense to get cheaper people in there, and then you're going to finally hit your peak number, and then you're off, right? That's it. Go somewhere else. and then just bring cheaper people in. It's just like churns them, and that's it, right? So that's like, that's not security. That's just, I don't know what that is. It's reality though,
True,
right?
true. Harsh reality. So,
Yeah.
uh, what's your happiest moment as a mentor, and what makes you sad as a mentor?
Sad. Oh man. Happiness is like we've already talked about, man. It's like seeing people's growth, right? And I'll use you again as an example, right? You were asking me simple, straightforward questions, like 18 months ago, or whenever we started talking in the DMs, and now, like you've said, right, you've like made all these like really positive like life changes, professional and personal, right? And here you are. Now you're like, on the team at AMP. Like seeing stuff like that's really cool to me, because
You're grooming me as a coach as well as a mentor, and like very thankful.
yeah, but it's those types of things that are cool to me, right? And it's like when people, like I said earlier, right, they send me like a person they were struggling with, and then how they were able to kind of problem solve and help that person. Like that stuff's really cool. Or they were like, hey, I was really looking into starting a side practice, blah 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 blah. I never did it, and then now they have one. Like that stuff's awesome, man. Like that's just like where impact, is the impact that I care to make, because things really, obviously, like it's bigger than me, right? It's bigger than you. Everything we're doing is talking about making a better profession, right? For the people who are in it, and for the patients and clients who are going to work with people in these fields. So that's the biggest thing. Sad as a mentor. I don't know. I don't know how to approach that one. I would say that like seeing how I'm trying to think of the politically correct way to phrase this. Right, there are people out there who put other people down, right,
Oh
and
yeah.
they put other thought processes down, even if they don't understand them. They put other whatever, like fitness or rehab tribes down, and then they're also the same people who have mentorship programs of their own, right? So it's just like, it's just weird, right? That's just weird to me, because it creates divided thoughts in people's heads. And what I mean by that is like, I'm thinking of examples of people who like the conversations I have, right, where they hear like a big account, right, who talks shit about something like breathing related, for example, and they're like, in
Yeah.
their head they start thinking, well, hey, wait a minute, like I use this breathing stuff and I actually get like really good results with it. Am I doing something wrong? Like these are literally thoughts people have, and that's
Hmm.
like, that's not appropriate in my eyes, right? Because we need to be building people up, right, is really what we need. And that doesn't mean like sugarcoat everything. You can have difficult conversations, right? You can say like, well, have you ever thought about things this way, and challenge their current thinking. That's a different conversation. But flat out like bashing what someone else is doing that you don't understand is a huge problem. And from a mentorship standpoint, or like a mentor standpoint, like that's very disheartening to me to see, because here I am thinking like, all right, we're gonna like keep elevating this person so that they are like feeling confident they can help people better, and then you have people who are also mentors and they're doing the opposite, right? Even if they don't realize that that's what they're doing. I don't know if that answers the question or not, but that is,
It does. And when you
yeah.
see people falling prey to that because they couldn't think critically for themselves, I think that
Right.
hurts.
It hurts, right? And that's it. And I mean, critical thinking is another word or term that I just think has lost meaning 100%. Like, because like, what does that even mean? But yeah, it's frustrating to hear, like when someone says like, they did breathing stuff and they're like, oh, am I making my clients fragile? And it's like, no, like what, like how is that even a thought process, right? It's like, I don't know. I can ramble on that subject too for a while, because it's just something that is just mind-boggling to me. But it's all right.
Gravity in the end kills you by Bill Hartman.
Disheartening. I'll just leave it at that. Some things are just disheartening, to see.
Breathing, we should be practicing it because gravity in the end kills you, as Bill Hartman says. So we need things to expand. So yeah.
Yeah, well, whatever. We can approach it from a lot of different angles, but it's all right. Yeah, I would say that's the disheartening. It's disheartening to
Yes.
see that kind of stuff when you have very, very good professionals who are good at what they're doing, who don't realize that they are, because of something else that someone says, someone
Yes.
of authority says. that's, if I had to sum it up, that's what I was getting at there.
And I've been lucky today, like after spending and knowing people on Instagram worldwide, the coaches worldwide for around almost year and a half probably. Today exactly I'm in a sweet spot. I exactly know whom to go for advice, whom to take seriously, whom not to take seriously, whom to like eliminate the noise elimination, and whom to go for information or guidance, help.
Yeah.
Sorted.
And you have a BS detector is probably the more important thing, because there 100% you're going to come across new people, right?
Yep.
And you're like, is this person like full of it, or are they going to help challenge my thinking a little bit? Which is important. It's important. To have a
When I
BS
shared DMs with you, I don't agree with this because this is happening irrespective of the name of the profile that's posting content. I don't agree. This is not what I think is correct. And yeah, those stuff.
Yeah, but that's good, because you go through the process, and dude, ultimately, like we're all going to be wrong about stuff,
Yeah,
right? And that's
sure.
fine. So it's just like like that, following people who have different thought process is encouraged, right? It's good because you're going to learn something, but also know the shortcomings of that person, right? And the shortcomings in yourself. Like that's all we're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we're done with the questions, and it has been a phenomenal episode, the first episode of AMP Radio. I hope the listeners enjoyed as much as you and I did, and we'll be back on AMP Radio with numerous other guests and their interesting stories of life, career, knowledge, everything combined. And yeah, it's a great start to the AMP Radio.
Yeah, man. And that's what it's about, right? Is relatability, right? So,
Yes.
right, this is a podcast, like I'll go out and just say, right? It's like for the people, right? It's for like people like you, for people like me, right? Maybe younger versions of me, maybe current versions of me, I don't know. But it's for that, right? To share relatable stories and the struggles that we all face as people who are actually like still in the trenches, working with patients on the training floor, working with clients. Very different than doing remote training for somebody. Very different scenarios, and the struggles we all face. So I'm glad that you got this going, because it's been in my idea book, or not idea book. It's been something people have been telling me I should do for a while, and I'm just like, whatever. I'll put it on the back burner. So right, here's the first episode. So we did the hard part. Now it's just figuring out where to go from here. So
just keep on going from here on.
Yeah, man, that's it.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as Shaun and I did, and we'll be back with other guests in the upcoming weeks. Have a great day. See you later.
All right. See ya. Thank you.